Embedding is the process in any language, including Arabic, of taking a sentence and turning it into a noun, an adjective, or an adverb so that it can be used in another sentence. The sentence that has been changed into a noun or an adjective or an adverb is called the embedded sentence. In this lesson, we're going to talk about sentence adjectives. In other words, how Arabic takes sentences and changes them into adjectives so that they can be used in adjectives in other sentences. Now, you remember that adjectives can either be in noun-adjective phrases or they can be predicates of an equational sentence. So sentence adjectives are going to be the same. Arabic has two ways of turning a sentence into an adjective in order to embed it into another sentence. Relative clause is one way. That's something you're probably familiar with. We'll do a quick review of it here, but not a complete presentation. And a participle, either an active or passive participle, in a noun-adjective phrase. To simply review the structure of relative clauses, you must have a head noun, and then you have an optional relative clause marker. It's not actually optional, it's just that you must have it. It's the alladhi, allati, etc. You must have it if the head noun is definite, and you can't have it if the head noun is indefinite. That's what the parentheses around that mark means. And then you have a sentence, and that sentence must contain a relator, some either verb conjugation or pronoun that refers back to the head noun and agrees with it. The relator can be just the conjugation of a verb. It can be a subject pronoun, like huwa. It can be an object pronoun on the end of a verb, an object pronoun on the end of a preposition, or an object pronoun on the end of another noun, which would be the equivalent to the second term of an idafa. So I've given simple examples of many of those options here. These sentences all mean about the same thing. I saw the student who something. So the first one, I saw the student who arrived from Cairo yesterday. Alladhi wasala min al-Qahira ams. Now, so talib would be the head noun. Alladhi is the relative clause marker. And then the relator, in this case, the he, the student did something, is the conjugation of the verb wasala that refers back to talib. So I saw the student who arrived yesterday. The next one is the same exact sentence, except this time I saw a student who arrived yesterday. The head noun in the main sentence is indefinite, and therefore you leave out the relative clause marker that you have in the first sentence. Is not there, and you just have the relator. I saw a student who arrived from Cairo yesterday. The other sentences are all have definite head nouns, but the relators are in different positions, and so shahadtu at-talib alladhi qabaltuhu amps. This time we have a pronoun on the end of a verb. So I saw the student who I met him yesterday. The next one, shahadtu at-talib alladhi sami'tu anhu amps. Again, on the object for preposition, I saw the student who I heard about him yesterday. Shahadtu at-talib alladhi qabaltu sadiqatahu amps. I saw the student who I met his girlfriend yesterday. In English we would say, I saw the student whose girlfriend I met yesterday. And shahadtu at-talib alladhi huwa min al-Qahira, just to show you that you can actually have a huwa in an equational sentence, and it will still be a relator referring back to talib. Just to review the different versions of the relative clause markers, we have in the singular alladhi for masculine, allati for feminine, plural, alladhina, feminine plural, allawati, and then the duals we have four forms, alladhani, alladhaini, masculine, and allatani, allataini, feminine. Notice that the first four, alladhi, allati, alladhina, and allawati, are only a single form. They don't change for case. But the dual ones do actually change for case, just like all duals do. The main point of this lesson is to teach the other way of changing sentences into adjectives, and that is by using a participle, either a passive participle or an active participle, in a noun-adjective phrase. There's several actually points that you should remember here. The first is that a participle is a verbal adjective. And because it is a verbal adjective, it's going to be a little bit verby. And so that's what the second point says. It acts like a regular adjective. It agrees. It looks just like it's kabir or something. But it has additional verbiness features. And what that means by verbiness is that it can take a subject or an object or an adverb or a prepositional phrase, just like as if it was a regular sentence. It can also appear alone without any of these things. Like a relative clause, when a participle is acting verbi and taking subjects or objects, etc., it is the whole phrase that acts as a single adjective, not just the participle itself. And so lots of times students get mixed up with all the extra verbs that go along with these things. But you have to think of, okay, there's the head noun. Remember, if you had a relative clause, you would have a levy and a whole sentence, and that whole thing as one unit would be considered one adjective. Well, it's going to be the same with an active or passive participle. If they take things like subjects or objects or prepositions or adverbs, all those things are going to be counted as part of the single adjective. We'll see examples of that soon. It is important to remember, however, that participles that are acting verbi agree with their subjects, not with their head nouns. In the large majority of cases, the head noun of the noun-adjective phrase is the subject of the participle. So it looks like the participle is agreeing with its head noun, just like a normal adjective would. However, in those few cases where some other noun than the head noun is the subject of the participle will always agree with that subject and not the head noun. These latter sentences can be compared to relative clauses where the relator is not the subject of the relative clause, but rather some object pronoun. And how one would want to translate these participles that are used in a verbi way is by using a relative clause. These two structures, using the participles with their accompanying words and using relative clauses, are the same. And it's very helpful for students just to always remember, when you see a participle in this kind of construction, say which, and that will get you the right relationship of how these words all together are going to function as an adjective, because as soon as you say which or that in this relative clausey kind of sense, you'll be recognizing that this participial phrase is functioning as an adjective in the main clause. So, of course, participles, active and passive, can just appear alone, and in that case, it's hard to feel whether they're verbi or not, and usually they're not. And so then they're just functioning as regular adjectives. And so we have al-ustadh, al-mashhur, the famous professor, al-aradi al-muhtalla, the occupied territories, al-talib al-najih, the successful student. But other times they do take other words, in which case they do have this verbi feel. And so we have al-kitab al-mawdu' hunak ala-tawila. Here we have mawdu', which has been placed, is how I'm going to translate it, and then two adverbials, there and on the table. So the book which was put over there on the table. Al-ustadh al-jalis al-maq'ad al-ali. So the professor, and then we have the active participle jalis, sitting. But this is a noun-adjective phrase, so I want you to immediately say which. Of course, since this is a person, you're going to change that which to a who. And the translation would be the professor who is sitting on the high chair, or the high stool, or something. And finally, al-kalimat al-maktuba ala hadhihi al-waraqa. Literally, the words written on this paper, I want you to say the words which are written on this paper, so you recognize that al-maktuba ala hadhihi al-waraqa is a unit. It's like a sentence that's been boiled down, and you capture that best by translating it as a relative clause. Active participles can take objects directly, but for whatever reason, they tend to take them after the preposition li. It seems a little clearer, I think, to Arabs, and so you're going to find most examples of active participles taking their objects with the preposition li. And so these are all examples from the corpus. We have al-usuliyun, which is the fundamentalists, al-mustamiluna lid-din al-islami, the fundamentalists who are using Islamic religion. In the translation, you can just say it as a direct object, but the actual literal translation would be who are using of the Islamic religion or something like that. and الأشخاص الخاضعون لأحكام هذا القانون, people who are subject to the rules of this law, or to the rulings or judgments or something of this law. Okay. Other times the verb that the participle comes from takes a preposition, and so then you just use that preposition instead of li. And so al-ashkhas al-bahithuna an ta'ziz masalihihim al-iqtisadiyya, people who are searching for, you might say, a way to strengthen their economic interests. And al-ashkhas al-atiluna an al-amal, people who are literally free of work or something like that, but it just means who are unemployed. The next example uses li again, so al-muwazzafun al-mustahiqun lit-tarfiyah, so employees who are worthy of being promoted khilal hadha al-aam, this year, and al-muwazzafun al-mutakhassisun fi majalat muasira, takhassasa takes fi, and so here the active participle is taking fi, employees who are specialized in contemporary areas or fields. On this page we see examples of where the active participle is clearly agreeing with its subject and not with its head noun. And so the first one means, one way to understand these is to change them back to relative clauses. So it says the American president whose term is ending, George Bush, okay? And so it would be Ar-Ra'is al-Amriki alladhi tantahi wilayatuhu, who his term is ending. And so wilaya, his term, is the subject of tantahi. And so when you change it to a participle, the muntahi becomes muhtahiya because it's going to be agreeing with the subject of that participle, wilaya, and not with Ra'is al-Amriki, which is the head noun. So it looks like you have an adjective in a noun-adjective phrase that doesn't agree with its head noun, but that's because you have a verbal adjective and it has to agree with its subject. So Ar-Ra'is al-Amriki al-Muntahiya wilayatuhu, wilayatuhu is the subject of muntahi, George Bush, whose term is ending. Okay, and you have a very similar thing with the next one. You say qimmat al-thamaniya, so the summit of 8, al-muqarrar in'iqaduha, okay, al-aam al-qadim. So the summit of 8, whose being held has been decided or determined or set for next year. And so muqarrar isn't really agreeing with qimma. Qimma is feminine, muqarrar is masculine, and its subject is in'iqad, because muqarrar is a passive participle, and its holding, its being held, has been set. So again, you have this noun-adjective phrase in which the adjective doesn't appear to be agreeing with its head noun because it is agreeing with its subject. And again, note and remember that al-muqarrar in'iqaduha al-aam al-qadim, that whole thing is a phrase, and it acts as one adjective in a noun-adjective phrase in the higher sentence. And it's very much like a relative clause. Alladhi, qurrira in'iqaduha al-aam al-qadim, if you want to change it to a relative clause. Now, for whatever reason, Arabs got used to doing this, and they feel it feels there's a sentence subject there, okay, especially with the passive participle. And so you'll find that even when the subject is feminine, sometimes you will get this passive participle in the masculine. And so mashari'a is a non-human plural. It should be having an agreement with as feminine singular, and iqama, the subject, is also a feminine word, but you still get the masculine adjective because it's felt that the subject of this is, it's a passive participle, the subject is a sentence subject, and they kind of feel it as masculine. You'll see this throughout the language. It seems weird, but it's common. So al-mashari'a al-muzma iqamatuha fi sanawat al-qalil al-muqbila, so the projects which are intended to be set up or established in the next few years. And this next one is similar. This is talking about a player who decided to withdraw from the championship. So it says, قرر الانسحاب من البطولة المقرر إقامتها في الأرجنتين, which have been set to be held in Argentina. And again, you have the situation where the head noun butula is feminine, the subject is iqamatuha, which is feminine, but you still get muharrar masculine because of this feel. And a final example, al-marad al-duwali lil-kitab al-jazairi, the international exposition of the Algerian book, okay, al-muqarrar iftitahuhu, which has been decided to have its grand opening, fi balad al-milyon shahid, in the town of the million martyrs, ash-shahr al-muqbil, next month. Finally, I've given you a whole sentence. Up to now, I've just been giving you phrases, but I just wanted you to see how one of these works in a real sentence. And I also wanted you to see how common it is to use verby things. And so here's one where we have this active participle being very verby, and then it's followed immediately by a verbal noun being very verby. And so just to kind of analyze the sentence before we really read it and understand it, intidhar, al-intidhar is the subject of the sentence. Biwus as-siyah al-bahithin, etc., up till intidhar, is the predicate of the sentence. And the reason you have the predicate first, well, there could be several reasons, but that's just the way it is. It's a prepositional phrase, and so they put it first. Biwus'i means it's something that they could do. Okay, so it says biwus as-siyah, which means Taurus basically can, but then it has this active participle modifying siyah. Okay, al-bahithina an al-hudu wal-as'ar al-rakhisa. So tourists who are searching for peace and quiet and cheap prices, and then biwasihim can al-intizar, they can wait. Okay, so you have this verbal noun as a subject plus the active participle as an adjective with siyah. Okay, so biwusa siyah al-bahithin an al-hudu wal-asar al-rakhisa. So al-bahithin an al-hudu wal-asar al-rakhisa, the whole thing is an adjective for siyah. So tourists in that situation can wait until the month of February when prices drop to between 30 and 50%.